Disclaimer. Most things I say about League of Legends are my opinion, as they cannot be proven as fact. Just keep in mind that my words are backed by the fact that I am in the top 18% of players in North America.
As the famous Chinese proverb goes, give a man a fish, and you feed him for a day. Teach a man how to fish, and you feed him for a lifetime. Lao Tzu, Icegiant. And today I'm going to be teaching you how to do your own runes, because what people fail to realize is that sure, you can go find runes on some kind of guide, or some person by the name of Eternal Hero on YouTube, but different games need to have different runes. There's a differentiation between what enemy champions are going to be picked, and even what champions on your team are going to be picked. And there are many versatile runes that are good and very, very good in specific situations. For example, Bone Plating is very good against bursty champions or Hail of Blades. Champions that are going to hit you 3 times in quick succession are going to result in Bone Plating blocking a lot of damage. So now, we're going to go take an in-depth look at every single rune that is available to you. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to your collection, and then you're going to go to runes, which is the 4th one. Now to start out with, you have 5 standard rune pages. I don't recommend using these ever unless you have no time to create a rune page. And generally, you need to make sure that you have time to do your runes, because you're only allowed to create 2 rune pages at the start. I end up creating 3 rune pages, because I bought 1 rune page at some point in time. However, I don't really need to. I can do the same rune page every single time I play the game. I can make a new one. Doesn't matter to me. It does not take me that long to do a new rune page. So all you have to do is be aware of how much time you have in the lobby, and it'll make it easy for you to do your runes. So it might take some time to, kind of research what runes do, and then you'll know which ones are good on certain champions. Sure, it might take you a long time to do your runes the first time you play a champion, but after that, you'll probably have it down, and you'll know generally what you want. And then you can just make little changes here and there, based on your team comp and the enemy's team comp. So, we can just create a new. And we have 5 different branches: Precision, Domination, Sorcery, Resolve, and Inspiration. I'm not really going to go into what each of these does, because a lot of them do kind of similar things, except in different ways that are good on different champions. Which is either increasing your damage or increasing how tanky you are, and then Inspiration has cooldown reduction stuff. Now, Precision. Something to keep in mind that you should do is down here in the bottom left, you have this list. Well, guess what? The grid is so much better. Also, something to keep in mind is that you can hold shift to see the kind of in-depth math and mechanics that goes into each ability. You should take some time looking at each of these to determine which one you like most. Because, you can just kind of look at the flat values of things. Like, for example, if we were to look at Gathering Storm, if in general your average game goes to 20 minutes, keep in mind that you would generally only have 24 AP or 14 AD at the 20-minute mark. You have 4 main runes in this tree. We have Press the Attack, Lethal Tempo, Fleet Footwork, and Conqueror. And I'll now go through each of these, what these are very good at. Press the Attack is good on any champion that can hit 3 auto attacks fast, and also provides a good amount of burst damage. So champions like Lucian especially loves this. If you want to go a more bursty Renekton, you can take this as well, because it's very easily procced with your W, which deals a lot of burst damage. The same thing goes for Pantheon. You can easily proc it with your 5-stack W. And any champion that can easily proc it and deals a good amount of burst damage can go press the attack. Lethal Tempo is very good on champions that can proc it easily and have a high need for attack speed. So, for example, Azir can proc this by simply using Q and sending a soldier forward. Then, after 1.5 seconds, he gains a burst of attack speed, which increases his damage output significantly for a short period of time. Any champion that can use an ability to easily proc Lethal Tempo is very good. For example, Caitlyn, Jinx, these are two champions with high range that can easily proc Lethal Tempo before going in. Very good on champions like that. And of course, there are other champions who don't even necessarily need to proc it early that are good with Lethal Tempo. Like any kind of attack speed steroid champion loves Lethal Tempo. For example, Master Yi, Nocturne are champions that don't necessarily need to proc it early, but still love the steroid of attack speed. Fleeting Footwork, it gives you good sustain. It gives you a decent amount of sustain, and the increased movement speed is nice on certain champions. Silas likes to take it into a bully lane where he is getting bullied. I run it on Jhin for the extra movement speed because that man is a movement speed beast. But generally, Fleet Footwork is not taken on that many champions anymore. Conqueror is taken on a bunch of champions. One thing to keep in mind is that melee champions will gain 2 stacks for every single attack or ability hit, but ranged champions will only gain 1. This means that ranged champions have to land 12 attacks or abilities before Conqueror is fully stacked and you gain that full adaptive damage as well as the Omni Vamp. Therefore, Conqueror is very good on champions that have higher durability, have a way to stack it quickly, and generally, this kind of factors into how quickly it stacks, but generally melee champions are better with Conqueror. Something that I don't understand why is meta is Conqueror Ezreal. Ezreal has to land 12 abilities before Conqueror is fully stacked, and rarely does so. His attack speed is not that high, even with his attack speed steroid on his passive, because Ezreal can very rarely attack in melee range in most team compositions. Generally, you're firing off Qs from a certain distance, and then you'll get to auto-attack the front line at given times. But generally, as Ezreal, I just hate Conqueror. Press the attack and Phase Rusher where it's at, even though those aren't really considered meta, which I don't understand. Next up, we have Overheal, Triumph, and Presence of Mind. Overheal is good on anybody that has natural lifesteal, and then anybody that needs a little bit of extra durability, like AD carries with, you don't even have to have built-in lifesteal, you could just have, Vamp Scepter or something like that, but Overheal gives you a little bit of poke resistance, and just in general durability. I honestly don't run it on anybody, though, because Triumph is super broken. It's extremely good on any champion that snowballs. Snowballing meaning that you get kills, and then you become super powerful, and you can kill everybody. You can 1v5 if you so choose. And Triumph is very good at doing that, because every single time you get a takedown, which means a kill or an assist on an enemy champion, you're going to regain 12% of your missing health. If you're low on health, Triumph will restore a huge amount of health, especially if you're a bruiser who already has a high amount of durability. The additional 20 gold is just extra. It's not super important. The 12% missing health is the main thing about this rune that makes it really good. Presence of Mind is similar, except instead of health, it'll increase your mana or energy regeneration when you have damaged an enemy champion, and then takedowns will restore your mana or energy. This is very good on any kind of mana or energy chugger, For example, Anivia and Cassidon use a ton of mana, and Presence of Mind can do a lot with keeping your mana up during some kind of big team fight. And then on the energy side of things, Zed and Akali use a lot of energy, so getting takedowns with those assassins can restore your energy. That way you can look to assassinate another person without having to wait for your energy to recharge. Next up, we have Legend Alacrity, Legend Tenacity, and Legend Bloodline. Legend Alacrity is good on any champion that wants more attack speed. I mean, that applies to so many different champions. However, you need to look at the enemy team's composition and decide if you want more tenacity. Tenacity does not reduce the duration of suppressions or knockups, but does reduce everything else. That includes polymorph, slows, stuns, anything like that. Tenacity will reduce how long you are slowed. This is really good against certain champions like Morgana, Lux, Nautilus, Leona. Any champion with a huge amount of CC that tenacity affects. Man, I run this. I even run this on Nautilus, which is low-key can be seen as troll, but having unflinching, which we'll see later, and Legend Tenacity gives you a good amount of tenacity, plus Mercury Treads, and you can take any CC to the face and then be out of it in like 0.2 seconds. Super good. Legend Bloodline means slowly you'll, throughout the game, just like with either of these, you'll gain lifesteal. This is particularly good on champions that are on hit and want lifesteal, such as it's very meta to take it on an AD carry, because it gives you a large, or well, not large, but it gives you lifesteal without having to buy a Vamp Scepter, which means you can simply buy other items without having to go into a lifesteal item. So if you so choose, you could have boots and 5 other items, and none of them provide you lifesteal because this rune provides you the lifesteal you need instead. Next up is Coup de Grace, Cut Down, and Last Stand. I want to be honest with you guys, even though Cut Down and Last Stand increase the damage more, I almost always take Coup de Grace because it is useful like all the time. Like on any champion that wants to deal more damage to a low health enemy champion, like assassins, AD carries can run it. Anybody that deals damage can take Coup de Grace. And I play a lot of champions that can execute people in some way, shape, or form. This is very good at that. Next is Cut Down, which deals more damage to champions with more max health than you. So let's say on the enemy team, they have, Cho'Gath, Mundo, and you're playing some kind of champion that struggles or will be the main DPS against the tanks. Your champion is probably going to want to run Cut Down so you can deal more damage against those massive frontliners. Next up is Last Stand, which will deal more damage while you are low on health. This is pretty good on most bruisers because, again, bruisers are very good at jumping from person to person, especially in a snowball situation with Triumph, where you are going to kill person to person to person and then gain that 12% missing health from Triumph, all while being at low HP and gaining the additional damage from Last Stand. So, a champion that should always run this is Tryndamere because he loves being at 1 HP. However, there are some other champions that can run it well as well, such as Set and Irelia, both champions that can stay at low health for long periods of time. And in general, probably not going to want to run this on AD carries, because if you're low health on an AD carry, you're probably going to die within the next few milliseconds. Next up, we have Domination. Domination is generally used for bursty situations where you're trying to take somebody down in only a few seconds. We have Electrocute, which deals a burst of damage after landing 3 separate attacks or abilities. This is very good for pokey champions that are able to land 3 separate attacks or abilities. Mages often run this, and Zed often runs this because he can land 2 shurikens followed by an E for a very easy proc of Electrocute. And just any champion that is looking to do burst damage and can land 3 separate attacks easily will often take Electrocute. Predator is an upgrade that is automatically put on your boots that when activated increases your movement speed towards enemies. And then your next ability will deal bonus damage. This is good for anybody that needs movement speed and also wants a little bit more burst power. An off-meta champion that I put Predator on is Annie, because it helps you set up your your Tibbers ult very, very well. Even if other people might see it as troll, Predator is very good at helping you get in a good position to land a good ult against a large group of enemies. Next up is Dark Harvest. Dark Harvest is good against any champion, one that can easily proc Dark Harvest, which means any champion that has good range and can, easily proc it, like Morgana W, Tormented Soil, can easily proc Dark Harvest with 0 counterplay. The same goes for Misfortune E, can easily proc Dark Harvest with 0 counterplay, and is generally good on some kind of champion that is looking to eliminate you once you are on 50% health or lower. So, lots of mages, lots of assassins, and a few 80 carries can run it as well, like Jhin and Misfortune. Hail of Blades is a super burst rune that is good on any champion that deals on hit damage with your standard auto attacks. Some meta champions that like to take this are Kai'Sa, Shaco, Pyke, because those 3 auto attacks that are in quick succession at the start of a fight deal a good amount of burst damage. So any champion that can, trying to burst somebody down with auto attacks, very good on that. Kai'Sa likes to run it because when she ults into the back line, she can go 1, 2, 3 stacks of plasma very quickly, and then follow it up with a W to deal the bonus damage with her W, as well as the missing health damage of her passive, making it very good at executing enemies. Next up, we have Cheap Shot, Taste of Blood, and Sudden Impact. Cheap Shot deals a little bit of true damage against champions that are impaired in some way. This can be slow, stun, knock up, anything like that. And the next hit against a champion with this, Cheap Shot will deal a little bit of bonus true damage to any champion that is slowed, rooted, stunned, knocked up, etc. So champions that are very good at applying these conditions, as well as wanting a little bit of extra damage, can run Cheap Shot. However, in general, it's not really seen as that good, because the true damage is pretty minimal, and Taste of Blood exists, which gives you quite a bit of sustain in lane, and a lot of champions run it. Any champion that can easily proc Taste of Blood usually runs it, as long as they're in the lane phase against enemy champions, because when you hit an enemy champion with an ability, you gain a decent amount of health, kind of like Fleet Footwork, but even more, except I think the cooldown is higher and you don't gain any movement speed. But after a short delay, you can use it again, and Taste of Blood can heal you quite a bit throughout a game. Very good for sustaining. Sudden Impact, I run this on any champion that is looking to deal damage in a short amount of time after using a dash, leap, blink, or teleport, or when leaving stealth. Shaco loves it because His Q is both a blink and a stealth. Katarina probably loves it. I don't play Katarina, but she's got tons of blinks. Any champion with a dash, leap, blink, teleport, or stealth probably runs this, or can choose to run this, because it'll proc very often and give you a burst of lethality and magic penetration. Kha'Zix is another good example. Next up, we have Zombie Ward, Ghost Poro, and Eyeball Collection. Generally, I only run Zombie Ward on support. This is because supports... you could run it on junglers too, but generally, supports are the main ones killing wards. Which means you end up with lots of free vision, which is the main thing supports want it for. However, other champions like a jungler might run it for the bonus adaptive damage that it gives you as you stack it up. But in general, you're not going to get that many zombie ward stacks as a jungler, especially early game. So you usually end up running something else. Ghost Poro just leaves behind a little Ghost Poro when one of your wards dies. I use this on certain junglers to leave a ward and then a deep ward, and then my Ghost Poro will remain there and provide vision, which is very good of keeping track of the enemy jungler. Pretty much, yeah, only... You could run this in a lane, because you could place a ward, the ward dies, and then the Ghost Poro remains and could warn you of a gank, so that's up to you. It also provides you bonus adaptive damage the more Ghost Poros you have as it stacks up. Again, not a rune that will affect you early game. Will not give you a lot of early game adaptive. However, Eyeball Collection is very good for Snowball Assassin champions. Champions that end up getting a lot of takedowns, because you can stack this very quickly. All it does is that upon takedowns, you gain permanent adaptive damage, and that stacks up, and then once you have it full, it gives you an even bigger boost. But I think the total is collect... Let's see. Gain an adaptive bonus of 1.2 attack damage or 2 ability power per eyeball collected. Upon completing your collection at 10 eyeballs, additionally gain an adaptive bonus 6 attack damage or 10 ability power. So that would be 18 attack damage total, or 30 ability power total at the very end of it. And you only need 10 takedowns, which generally isn't that hard. Next up, we have Ravenous Hunter, Ingenious Hunter, Relentless Hunter, and Ultimate Hunter. Ravenous Hunter just provides you with Omnivamp as you kill each champion, similar to Kindred's Mark. You are going to want to, and this applies to all of these, you are going to want to kill every single, or get a takedown on every single enemy champion. So there's 5 total, resulting in 5 total available stacks. For this one, you get 1.5% per stack. Ingenious Hunter, just same thing, except you grant permanent item haste, which includes your trinkets. So like your yellow ward, blue ward, red sweeper, and then any items that you might have. So any champion that has multiple active items generally might want to take this. For example, Turbo Chem Tank, Locket of the Iron Solari, and then any other item that has an active out there, like Ghost Blade, Rocket Belt. Just a champion that generally wants to use an active item a lot can take this. This just provides out-of-combat movement speed. I run it on Shaco because Shaco loves to have movement speed. You could run it on Hecarim. Hecarim loves to have movement speed. Generally, any champion that enjoys Moby Boots or has, just regularly high movement speed like Skarner could take this. Then Ultimate Hunter, it just gives you permanent ability haste on only your ultimate based on unique takedowns. I run this on Leona because it makes my Leona ult like 40 seconds after I eventually have all 5 unique takedowns. And any champion that loves their ultimate and their ultimate is really important to them can take this. Zed loves it. Amumu. Champions. Shen. Any champion like that would love it. Silas could take it too. Because his ult cooldown's already really low and he loves to spam it. Sorcery. We have Summon Aerie, Arcane Comet, Phase Rush. People take Aerie just for the guaranteed poke. However, Aerie should only be put on champions that shield or heal, in my opinion, because Arcane Comet is bigger and better poke. So why would you ever take Aerie if you're not healing or shielding? Because what Aerie does, Aerie is like the same thing as Comet, except it can provide a bonus shield to an ally you heal or shield. So it's basically Comet, except it deals less damage, but in exchange, it can provide a bonus shield to an ally that you heal. Then Arcane Comet, just basically Aerie, except it lobs a Comet that deals more damage than Aerie whenever you hit a champion with a spell. And then Phase Rush, hitting an enemy with 3 separate attacks or abilities grants a burst of movement speed, and I think you gain 75% slow resistance. I run this rune on Ezreal, even though it is considered off meta, because Ezreal can easily proc it, and he loves the burst of movement speed for kiting or chasing down enemies. So I don't know why I always get pinged for running Phase Rush on Ezreal. Next up, other champions that enjoy Phase Rush, Ryze, a lot of other mages like Syndra, Orianna, champions whose positioning is very important, and then melee champions who are trying to chase people down like Hecarim and Udyr like to take this. Again, Phase Rush can be taken on a lot of champions who aren't considered meta and it not be troll. However, be prepared to be pinged for it for no reason. Nullifying Orb. Just good against any enemy composition that has lots of AP damage. It'll give you a little bit of durability similar to Blitzcrank Shield. It pops out at low health and then it'll absorb a little bit of damage for you. Mana Flow Band. Good on any champion that uses a lot of mana, especially poking abilities, because you need to hit enemy champions to gain stacks of Mana Flow Band. So some notable champions that love Mana Flow Band, obviously any champion that needs lots of mana, like Kassadin, Anivia, any other, lots of pokey supports will take it, like Zyra, Karma, and champions like that. Next up we have Nimbus Cloak. Nimbus Cloak is secret OP, guys. Secret OP. The burst of movement speed directly after your flash can mean lots of people wasting their flash trying to follow you, but that burst of movement speed means they are too far behind. It also gives you a little bit of burst of movement speed when you use any summoner spell. So, teleporting behind a lane means you get a burst of movement speed as soon as you show up. Using Ignite can give you a burst of movement speed trying to chase somebody down. Nimbus Cloak is just very good at providing a burst of movement speed. I use it on a lot of engaged supports because I can flash on people and then be very fast. Or if I need to flash out of a situation, that burst of movement speed is very good as well. Next up we have Transcendence, Celerity, and Absolute Focus. Transcendence is just good on any champion that wants lots of ability haste. So mages who want lots of to be able to cast lots of spells. Also keep in mind that once you hit level 11, it'll, on a champion takedown, it'll reduce the remaining cooldown of basic abilities by 20%, kind of like Navori Quick Blades, but only on every champion takedown. So champions that love to spam their abilities love this, especially Sylas. I would always take this on Silas, because Silas W is extremely good when he's on low HP. So he can 1v5 fights by killing multiple people, healing up with Triumph, and then this cooldown reduction means his W is able to provide lots of healing, keeping him alive during fights. Celerity just increases move speed bonuses on you. Any champion that wants lots of movement speed ends up taking this. Yeah, that's about it. I mean, champions with tons of movement speed take this because it increases the bonus to their movement speed. Next up is Absolute Focus. I don't really know many people that run this. It gives you a flat amount of adaptive damage while you're 70% health or more. So the only people that it really makes sense to take this on is long-range champions who don't end up taking damage in a fight. Especially super long-ranged mages would love to take this, like Zoe and Xerath probably run this if they so choose, but I mean, I probably end up taking Transcendence instead. Next up we have Scorch, Water Walking, and Gathering Storm. Scorch, good in the early game for pokey reasons. Champions that enjoy this are, Zyra, Karma, any pokey champion in the that's early game oriented could take a Scorch. Water Walking is good for any champion that spends a lot of time in the river. Specifically, jungles and supports will end up being in the river the most. So they'll end up taking this because that's when they'll get the most value out of it, especially junglers. Supports are hit or miss on whether you're taking Water Walking. Somebody like Bard, who spends a lot of time compared to other supports in the river, could definitely take Water Walking and get a lot of value out of it. Gathering Storm is for any champion that is looking to scale. Some examples of this might be Ezreal. Nasus could take this if he so choose, but generally won't. But any champion that is looking to scale over the course of the game, Orianna can take this because her abilities are primarily based on AP scaling, on her AP scaling ratio, and not so much on their base values, which means a lot of her damage comes from items, which means that generally she's not very powerful until later in the game. Next up we have Resolve, which means we have Grasp of the Undying, Aftershock, and Guardian. Grasp of the Undying is very situational. If you're not able to proc Grasp of the Undying often, you probably don't want to take it because you're not going to get any value out of it. Some champions who do like to run it are Gangplank, Senna. Ezreal could theoretically run it. And then if you're in a melee on melee matchup, then you could also run it because that'll still be pretty easy for you to it'll still be easy for you to proc Grasps of the Undying. But generally, champions that want to take it are tankier champions that can semi-easily proc it, like in the situations that I explained before. Next up is Aftershock. Aftershock, in my opinion, is low-key kind of busted because any champion with some kind of hard immobilization, like a stun, a root, a knock-up, gains a bonus armor and magic resist, and then we'll do a small explosion that deals a decent amount of damage in a melee range around them. However, the main thing about Aftershock is how good it is on engaged champions, because that burst of armor and magic resist makes you pretty tanky for the first few seconds of combat. So somebody like Leona, Nautilus, who else engages? Thresh can take this if he so chooses. Shen, Jarvan. But when you engage, you are opening yourself up to a lot of damage being focused on you. And Aftershock is very good at making you largely durable during the first few seconds of a fight after you engage. Super good. Guardian is good on champions who are looking to... generally, you can only run it on certain supports, generally, you can only run Guardian bot lane because it requires 2 people for Guardian to proc. And you're wanting to run it on champions that are babysitting your AD carry. So a lot of supports that like to take this are Taric, Braum, Thresh can run it, most enchanters can run it. Your engaged supports are generally not going to run it because they are not babysitting your AD carry. They are usually in deep on the enemy line and are therefore not near your AD carry trying to keep them safe. So Guardian is a very good rune for anybody trying to sit on your AD carry and keep them alive from assassinations or pokes and stuff like that. Next up we have Demolish, Font of Life, and Shield Bash. Demolish is good for any champion that very often pushes and is able to deal damage against the enemy tower. So a lot of lane bullies can run this, or champions with huge amounts of wave clear who bully the enemy champion out of lane, meaning you often get to the enemy turret. For example, Irelia could run this very, very well because her lane phase is extremely strong. She can either bully or kill the enemy laner and then push to the enemy tower decently quickly, and then you get lots of demolish value off that. Same thing goes for Leona. Leona is looking to engage, get kills, or bully them out of lane, and then you can push to the tower and get lots of demolish damage. And other split pushers also could enjoy demolish, like Nasus and many other top laners. If you are a split pusher, then you could easily take demolish. Font of Life, I don't run it on many champions. A champion that I do run it on is Thresh because he has lots of movement in pairing, and I generally don't like Demolish or Shield Bash on him. But in general, Font of Life is not good on that many champions. But in general, the only champions that could take it and get a lot of value out of it are supports with many movement in pairs, like slows, roots, stuns, etc. Shield Bash is good on any champion that consistently and often gains a shield. Shield Bash is good on champions like Shen, because Shen's passive. Vi's passive. Sion gains a massive shield with it whenever he uses his W. Garen could run it with his W, though it's not as good because his W has a pretty long cooldown. I run this on Nautilus because Nautilus very consistently gains a shield. And you don't even have to be a champion with a consistent shield as long as an ally consistently shields you. So for example, if you were an AD carry and you had something like a Janna or a Lulu in the bot lane, you could run Shield Bash and still get value out of it. Because every time they shield you, you get that bonus to your next attack. Next up is Conditioning, Second Wind, and Bone Plating. Conditioning doesn't activate until the 12-minute mark, but it gives you 9 armor and magic resistance, and then increases your armor and magic resistance by 5%. I do run this on some supports, but just know that you won't get as much value as other tanky champions that are not played as support, because this rune is very good on champions that have lots of money. The more tanky items you have, the more you get from that 5% boost. Somebody that I always run this on is Ornn, because Ornn passive does the same thing, which means he's getting a huge amount of bonus to his armor and magic resist. Some other champions that I do run it on, even though you could run other things, are Leona, Nautilus, other champions that are looking to be tanky and build lots of armor and magic resistance. But, just keep in mind that as a support, you generally don't have that much money. Next up is Second Wind. You can take any champion can take this. Generally, champions with a large health pool, though, and specifically against enemy teams that have a good amount of poke, because this will regen some of your missing health, especially against pokey champions who will activate it a lot and try to bully you out of lane. Bone plating is good against bursty champions, or any champion really that'll hit you 3 times in a short amount of time. This is especially good against electrocute champions, Hail of Blade champions, because those are champions that are looking to hit you 3 times in a short amount of time. Bone plating is very good at reducing that damage, so makes you more durable and is extremely good against these assassin-y type champions. Next up we have Overgrowth. Overgrowth just basically gives you more max health when minions or monsters die near you. Generally, I only take this on health monsters like Scion and Cho'Gath, who have infinite health scaling, but I do sometimes run this on Nautilus or Leona when these other 2 runes do not end up cutting it. Next up is Revitalize, which increases your healing and shielding power, as well as this counts as regeneration. Not your standard health regeneration, but like regeneration effects, like Mundo Ult. So champions that do lots and lots of healing or shielding can run Revitalize and get a huge amount of value from it. For example, champions that have a ton of healing would be like Soraka, Aatrox, Sylas, Irelia. They could all run Revitalize and get a lot of value out of it, as well as other champions that have lots of shielding, like Karma, Lulu, could also run Revitalize and get a lot of value out of it. Unflinching is very similar to Legend Tenacity, except instead of having to stack it up throughout the game and gaining stacks of it, you just have it based on your missing health instead. So while you're at max health, it provides 10% tenacity, but when you're below, I think it's 30% health. Yeah, when you're at 30% health or lower, it increases to a total of 30% tenacity and slow resistance. So same as Legend Tenacity, very good against lots of CC heavy team comps. Lastly, we have Inspiration, which is Glacial Augment, Unsealed Spellbook, and Prototype Omnistone. Glacial Augment gets the most value on champions that need to slow down their target so they can hit key abilities. Generally, Glacial Augment is not really taken on many champions, because if you can't land your abilities and require Glacial Augment to do it, then you're probably not the greatest at the game. However, one champion that likes to run Glacial Augment is Senna, because she can get that first stack, or she can get that first auto attack, and when she hits an enemy with an auto attack and a Q, she gains a soul for her passive, which means that slow is very good for getting those free soul stacks, especially in lane. But lots of champions can get value out of this. Any champion that likes to kite, but in general, not really run that often. You could run it on champions like Ahri, Neeko, Cho'Gath, but again, not really run that often. Unsealed Spellbook. This is kind of a quirky one. It's a niche one that basically lets you swap out what runes you take. Or sorry, not runes. It lets you swap out what summoner spells you take. Usually, you run this on solo laners like Gnosis. You can run it on Twisted Fate if you so choose. You can swap out... usually it's for swapping out Teleport for some kind of lane engage summoner spell like Ignite or Ghost. That way you can have a strong lane phase as well as teleporting for team fights and objectives. Omnistone is even more niche than Summoner Spellbook. I don't know a single reason that you would want to run this, because you end up getting a random keystone, and what if that keystone is totally useless to your champion? Why do people run it? I don't know. Next up, we have Hex Flash, Magical Footwear, and Perfect Timing. Hex Flash is very good for any champion that is looking to engage and has a combos very well with Nimbus Cloak, which is the one that gives you a burst of movement speed after using a summoner spell. Even though Nimbus Cloak is based on the cooldown of the summoner spell used, it still gives you a little bit of a burst of movement speed that is good for engaging over walls and other hidden locations. Generally, you take it on engaged supports, especially melee champions like Blitzcrank, Thrash, Set, Alistar. Those are the types of champions that get a lot of value out of Hex Flash. Magical Footwear gives you, it's basically 300 gold. This rune is worth 300 gold. I don't run it on any champion because I usually like to buy my own boots. Maybe this is because I play support. Junglers could run this. AD carries could run this well because they're not necessarily looking to buy boots until later. So getting a free set of boots at the 12-minute mark or earlier based on takedowns can be very good for them. Perfect Timing gives you a free stopwatch that is not available until 14 minutes, but then again, takedowns reduce that time. But this is a very good rune. It's worth 650 gold. However, it's only mainly to get a lot of value out of it, generally good on champions that build Zonias. So any champion, which means almost every mage in the freaking game. And then you could run it. You could run this rune on any champion, especially AD carries, because AD carries also love to have stopwatch for team fights to prevent them from getting assassinated. Also good there. As long as you use stopwatch, this rune is for you. Next up, we have Futures Market, Minion Dematerializer, and Biscuit Delivery. This one's self-explanatory. It just lets you go into debt to buy items. Generally, nobody runs this. However, a situation that you could run Futures Market is probably a lane where you're getting bullied a lot, like a poke lane, and you're not sure when you'll have enough money to back. If you can't guarantee backing at a good time, Futures Market could probably give you some value there. Minion Dematerializer is good on is a niche one that is good on champions who can't full combo a wave, but the bonus damage helps you do that. For example, Ahri. Ahri's Q normally cannot full clear a wave, but if you minion dematerializer the caster minions so that you deal bonus damage to the caster minions, you can Q a minion wave and your Q will boop and will go forward and back and then kill caster minions. And then the other situation that minion dematerializer is good is that if you're bot lane with relic shield or shoulder guards and you're not sure how often you're going to be able to walk up and get the last hit on a cannon minion. So this is good on melee supports against pokey or punishing enemy lanes, and you want to guarantee those relic shield / shoulder guard cannon procs. Next we have Biscuit Delivery. Biscuit Delivery is only for the lane phase and primarily good against enemy lanes that are pokey or champions that use lots of mana and are looking to poke themselves. So, for example, Jinx uses quite a bit of mana in lane because of her Q. The same thing goes for Ashe, Caitlyn. Any champion that uses a lot of mana using abilities can run Biscuit Delivery to regenerate that mana and continue to use their abilities in the lane phase. So lots of champions can get value out of this. Many mages, many AD carries, even supports. Next up we have Cosmic Insight, Approach Velocity, and Time Warp Tonic. Cosmic Insight, it just gives you a flat amount of Summoner Spell Haste and Item Haste. Generally, you take this on supports, kind of similar to the Hunter, the Ingenious Hunter, where you have active items, generally can take Cosmic Insight, and then somebody who might use their Summoner spells a lot, like a support who uses Flash to engage. Annie might run this because she wants to flash Tibbers more often. Champions like that can get a lot of value out of Cosmic Insight. Approach Velocity is good on champions who are trying to chase down enemies with impaired movement speed. So Ashe gets a lot of value on this because she impairs enemies' movement speed with every single auto attack. Any champion that has lots of movement speed impairments and likes to chase down enemies can run Approach Velocity and get a lot of value out of it. Some examples of this are Tom Kench. His Q will slow somebody, and then it makes it easier for him to chase him down. The same thing applies to Braum. You can run this on a lot of champions. Next up is Time Warp Tonic. This one is pretty niche. It's primarily only good in the early game. Engaged supports often run it because they want the movement speed gained from the restoration effect, but not that many champions run it. I would say in general, your engaging champions that want in your support role generally are the ones that can take this and get value out of it. But that wraps up all the runes. Next up are these three little things over here. Adaptive damage, attack speed, ability haste. All of these are really self-explanatory. If you want to deal more damage but don't care about ability haste or attack speed, then you take this. If you want more attack speed, take this. If you want to spam your abilities more, take this. Do you want MR or armor? Take one of these two. More damage? Hey, look, even more damage. Do you want health, armor, or magic resist? Hey, there you go. However, keep in mind that this can change based on what the enemy team's composition is. For example, if the enemy team has 5 APs, you're probably going to lock in magic resist, magic resist. If the enemy champion has 5 AD champions, you're going to run armor, armor. If you're playing some kind of burst champion that wants to deal lots of damage, you're probably going to run adaptive, adaptive. So just keep in mind on what your champion does and what the enemy team's composition is. If you're hearing this, thank you for making it all the way to the end of this video. Hopefully you learned a lot and you'll be able to use this knowledge to help you win more games in League of Legends. If you did learn a lot and you think you could help some of your friends who are maybe not so good at the game, feel free to share it with them. Please comment below what you are wanting to learn about next. Be it wave management. Maybe you want to learn kind of the tricks of certain particular champions. Feel free to let me know down in the comments below. Also, don't forget that I stream daily. I don't have a set schedule per se because of things that I have to do in life, but generally somewhere between 12 p.m. Eastern and 9 p.m. Eastern is generally sometime between there when I stream. But if you drop a follow, which is free, you can turn on notifications and see when I'm streaming. I generally stream League of Legends, but there are other things that I stream, such as Halo games on the hardest difficulty, so just make sure to keep an eye out for me. Thanks.